Yes, everybody, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur and Dave and Jack here. We're going to be giving our reactions to Hugo Lloris's comments recently. One of my favorites, Hugo, has been speaking about Daniel Levy, and he had this to say to defend Daniel Levy, just sort of on maybe the recent pressure that's been on him from the fans in regards to the protests and everything. And he said, "That's not the first time that fans have protested." He said, "But I always used to repeat, Daniel has my support. I know from the inside all the really good things that he does for the club. He took the club at one level and brought it to an amazingly new level. Today, Tottenham belongs to the best clubs in the world. Obviously, when you have difficulties in your season and you don't have the results you expected, there's always a guilty one," he says. "But I know, and we all know, the reputation of Spurs, lacking trophies. But at the same time, you have to realize that in 20 years, the club became something huge in the world of football, not only on the pitch, but off the pitch, with a strong image from around the world. And I know that they are working do all the best to get to that success missed by the club. For me, Daniel has been really good for the club, and he deserved a lot of credit about that. Again, you cannot win trophies with just one person. It's about picking the right people and creating the environment that is going to help the team to success." Now, Dave, do we think Hugo Lloris is right that, maybe you can't win trophies with just one person? That, maybe that everyone's picking on Daniel Levy a bit unfairly here. He feels like, when things are difficult, when you're having a difficult season, there's always going to be a guilty person. There's always going to be a scapegoat. Seems to be making out that Daniel Levy's the scapegoat for the Spurs fans this season.
Um, Look, where I do agree with Hugo Lloris is Daniel Levy does deserve a bit of respect for from where he's brought the football club to where it is now. In terms of size, stature, reputation within the game. It's now renowned, known as one of the world's best football clubs. And where we're even competing at between when I was a kid to where we have been at times under Daniel Levy, I think has been a change. We've had numerous of good cup runs, semi-finals, finals, a couple of league runs and stuff like that. So I do think he deserves an element of respect. But I do think it's come to a time where he's brought the club as far as he can,
Yeah.
and that now maybe we're starting to regress. That some of the things that he built the club on, good young recruitment, stuff like that, I think he's sort of reverted back to. And to a large degree, I think he's missing the element that you need the experienced players, the big players to come in here and help push this on. And I don't think he has a risk appetite for that. But I do think he does deserve respect in terms of the infrastructure, the stadium that we go to, the training complex, stuff like that. He has brought the club on a lot in terms of that regard. But I'm a bit surprised about Hugo Lloris's sort of defense in terms of Daniel Levy in general, because considering this is a guy that, when he was speaking about the watch, his literal quote was, "Who does such a thing at a moment like this?" So he didn't get into the terms of, again, Daniel Levy being a bit tone deaf or maybe not the
Yeah.
recruitment not being up to par, stuff like that. I can understand where Hugo Lloris is coming from. Look, in his time at the club, from 2011 to where the highs of the Champions League final, a couple of league runs, good cup runs, etc. I can understand where he's coming from as a player. He has sort of seen that growth as well. He's been there from the move from White Hart Lane into the stadium, the old training complex into the new one. So he has seen that, and I can understand that to a large degree. But interesting that he didn't talk about the right recruitment to help push them on at times when needed, etc., etc. So I'm a bit dubious on that one.
I found it funny that he sort of maybe it sounded like, oh, well, everybody's just got to pick a guilty person, for all the things that have gone wrong in a season. It's like, yeah, I can see how you would, come up with that sort of logic, to try to make it sound like, oh, we're just finding a scapegoat. Daniel Levy, I don't think, can qualify as, just a scapegoat type person. He's a guy that has been around for a very, very long time and has been the most consistent influence in and around Tottenham Hotspur, for this 20 plus year period. Now we've only had, the one bit of success really. And yes, of course, we have seen Spurs technically rise in status, rise in sort of levels. He is right about that. But I just think, the way that he made it out to be as if, everybody's just got to pick a scapegoat, right? I don't really think that's sort of the logic that you can use, with Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy has more control, more power, and more influence than anybody in and around that football club. In a way, there's no one holding him back other than Daniel Levy holding himself back, from helping the club to success who's, standing in his way, who's getting it, in his footpath, of leading us to more success. That's what it kind of makes it. That's what I think Hugo Lloris is sort of making it out to be, as if he is just this, scapegoat that can do, that is only trying his best, and there's only so much he can do, type of thing. I think that could be true if it were a player that you were talking about. If we're just talking about an Eric Dyer, a Brennan Johnson, sort of player, yeah, maybe that can be like technically a scapegoat. There is in a way only so much they can do, only so much they can actually impact and change. Daniel Levy is not a scapegoat. I don't think he can qualify as one, because when you are the guy that technically is the head dog, you're the one who's in charge. You're the one who can basically change everything with a snap of a finger. I don't think, that's, really, a fair word to be using. I would never use a scapegoat, even when it came to like world leaders or anything like that. In a way, you are the ones that have been put in charge. You're the ones who have been, been put that faith into to make things happen and make things change. There's no one that should be standing in your way to get that done. And that's what, at least that quote I found to be a bit sort of
Well,
irking from Hugo. It's
I
like,
think
I don't think that's how scapegoat works, to be honest.
Well, I think, look, I don't think it is a scapegoat, to be quite frank. I don't like this word scapegoat. At the end of the day, it's called accountability. At
Right.
the end of the day, Daniel Levy's the one that sets the remit that the director of football and the manager comes in and works off. If that remit doesn't match up to the guys that you're bringing in to do the jobs, for instance, you're bringing in managers, win now managers, and you're matching it up with poor recruitment or young
Yeah.
recruitment. It doesn't add up. That stems from Daniel Levy. The director of football, again, works off the remit that Daniel Levy sets them to work off. Look, Daniel Levy, you can't really argue with too much really more on how much Tottenham spend now, you know. But the reality is we spend it wrong. And the reason why we're spending it wrong is because the lack of a consistent plan right throughout the club on the football inside. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to bring in a director of football and a manager and you're pairing them up correctly, you've got to give it time to work. You look at the amount of director of footballs, the amount of interim managers, and the amount of managers that we've had over his tenureship. He's constantly chopping and changing plan, constantly chopping and changing direction. That all comes from him. So he's not the scapegoat. He's the guy that where the
Yeah.
where where the accountability goes to. That's on him. Look, I think, as Hugo Lloris, he's probably does lie a little bit towards Daniel Levy. He gave him good contracts. He was club captain. It was a young team that he grew with when he first joined from 2011 all the way through to the Champions League final, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, what Lloris doesn't understand is he was a good servant at Tottenham, but he's not a Tottenham fan.
Mm.
All of his
Yeah.
focus isn't on this football club, and stuff like that. And I'm not being funny, but he's being club captain. He probably knows that there's a job there for him in the future as well, somewhere along the line,
Yeah.
if he really wants it. So for me, that's why he's probably coming out and saying scapegoat him, but I don't think it is. I do think it is where the accountability goes to.
Yeah.
What he sets on the football side is it works its way down. It all comes from him. It all works from him. And that's where the accountability lies, unfortunately. Unless we start going after players. But when we did, Hugo Lloris famously came out
Yeah.
and was anti that. So, I mean, where does the
You
accountability lie
can't
at a
win.
football club? Is there none at all?
You
Is
can't
it
win in
close shot
Hugo.
where they all defend each other because they know they're making millions out of it? Or is there accountability? Because I remember him having a digger, Saints fans
Yeah.
stop going after us and stuff like that. So where does the accountability lie here, Jack?
Yeah, you can't point the finger in any direction, in Hugo Lloris's eyes. I just thought, maybe the last little quote there was also interesting, Dave, where he says, again, you cannot win trophies with just one person. It's about picking the right
That's true.
people and creating the environment that is going to help the team to success. It's almost like, though, Hugo maybe accidentally admitted to the fact that Daniel Levy hasn't necessarily picked the right people to create that winning environment and that winning culture. Because again, Daniel Levy can have control over that. If he had brought in, let's say, a Parachi sooner and brought in, people that were willing to help, change the recruitment department. If he had fired Steve Hitchens sooner, if he had brought in, more people in and around him to help push him, in the right direction. Because we know Daniel Levy, I think we've heard this before. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of people around him that kind of are willing to tell him home truths, willing to say to him, listen, I think you should be looking at it this way. Perhaps I think we were told it was really only Parachichi once he came through that was actually willing to challenge, Daniel Levy
Yeah.
on anything. If he had brought in people around, the culture, around, the boardroom that would be willing to do that, be willing to sort of meet him toe to toe, tell him this is what fans are thinking, this is where I think we need to be headed. perhaps, this winning culture, this winning environment that Hugo is talking about could actually manifest and could happen. It's just that it's about picking the right people, according to Hugo. It's about picking the right people to do that. And Daniel Levy simply hasn't done that. So I thought that was also an interesting quote, that he practically admitted to Daniel Levy not picking the right people around the culture, around the staff, around the dressing room, around, the club itself, to help drive success and deliver that. Because in a way, he is right. It's just that Daniel Levy also has control over that. That's not necessarily an excuse.
Well, I do think he picks a lot of yes men who sort
Yeah.
of are afraid to challenge him, or and maybe look, maybe it's not even by design. Maybe these people just know. Oh, when you look at Daniel Levy and analyze him, just butter him up, tell him what he
Yeah.
wants to hear, etc., etc. May not be inherent from Daniel Levy. It could just be that these are the sort of guys that he's employing or whatever, and they've sort of succumbed into that because they want to keep their job at Tottenham Hotspur. It could just be that's the case. But I do think, again, creating that challenging environment is a fine line. You know, we know Daniel Levy doesn't like to be challenged. Danny Rose done it. Look at him.
Yeah.
Romero's challenged him. We haven't really seen Romero play for the football club since. Conte challenged him. He was gone very quickly. As soon as Jose Mourinho
True.
started to lay blame upstairs, he was gone very, very quickly. So we know that he doesn't like to be challenged to a certain degree. But I do think if he's smart in terms of the footballing side of things, and even in the business side of things, it's always good to have someone that has different ideas or is not afraid to sit there and challenge your beliefs, just as long as it doesn't go over the top. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is a good, steady environment that you can create like that. And I do think that's what's missing at Tottenham. Like you said, Paratici was able to challenge Daniel Levy. And I think, the way he was looking at in terms of the youth recruitment or having a good product at youth level, especially at under 21s, I think he's changed his mind on that. Keeping some of these players
Uh-huh.
around, whereas before Daniel Levy was like, look, they're just academy kids. It's all right. Let them move on. They're not good enough to come into the team or whatever. But I think Paratici said, well, you're missing a trick here. You have good academy products, ones that don't make it into the team. If they do, they save you money. But if they don't, you can sell them on and it's pure profit on all your financial things. You have it, and I think Paratici was able to challenge him, but put it back to him in terms that relate to him. And I think that was a huge
Yeah.
asset to have. So I do think Daniel Levy would do himself well, doing everything he can to get Paratici back in place in this football club come the summer. Because when he was there, I would argue, I think it was kicking on in the right direction in
Spurs were
terms of
behaving a bit
recruitment.
differently. Yeah.
Yeah, but since Johan Lang has come in, that recruitment strategy has sort of changed to even a more of a younger element, and I
Yeah.
think it's sort of maybe putting us back further than where we actually need to be. And I think he would do very well in getting Paratici to come back in here.
100% agree with that. Just quickly, can you add Hugo Lloris to maybe a list of unreliable, maybe narrators, unreliable people, to give their takes on Spurs? We had this conversation before with Sam and with I forget, I think it might have been the other David Harris, about Michael Dawson, Aaron Lennon, I think Jermaine Defoe as well. We might have spoken about, guys that technically been on the books of Spurs. Can we actually trust them to give their takes, on this type of stuff? Or, are they there as kind of mouthpieces, would you say, Dave?
Look, first of all, I want to say I really do respect Hugo Lloris to a large degree in terms of, when he first arrived, Tottenham did have big, baby bar Paul Robinson actually. Tottenham had big troubles in the goalkeeper departments for a lot of my lifetime, bar them two goalkeepers. And I do think Hugo Lloris sort of restored my faith in goalkeepers to a large degree. And I think, he has been a very good servant to
True.
Tottenham Hotspur. And I want to, I want to put that out there. I know the end came around a bit bitterly. It was clear
Yeah.
that he was done, etc. I fully understand that, but I do respect Hugo Lloris in terms of what he's done in goals for Tottenham Hotspur. But I'm trying to work out, Jack, is it because they're on the payroll, or is it because are we missing something here, or are these genuinely the players that actually loved being here, loved playing for this club, loved representing the badge in a good light, and maybe that's why they're coming out in defense of Tottenham, because it's like, look, I've played there, I absolutely love it, I love the fans, etc., etc. It's my duty, to come out and defend this football club, and that's where they come out and defend it as a whole, rather than actually being on
Interesting.
the payroll as Daniel Levy. I'm trying to work that one out myself, because some of the names you listed off there, Michael Dawson, an absolute brilliant
Legend, one
servant
of
to
my
this
favorites.
football club.
Yeah.
Jermaine Defoe, an absolute brilliant servant to this football club. Hugo Lloris, an absolute brilliant service to this football club. And you're talking about players that when they were put out there, they performed for
Yeah.
this football club. So
Yeah.
That's where I'm maybe a bit hesitant. Just go, yeah, they're on the payroll, another guy on the payroll, etc. I do think there is an element where it does come from their love for this football club, and maybe they also get pissed off with the Mickey being taken out of it all the time. I think where you do decide whether they're on the payroll or not is when they start coming after fans who adore these guys, fans who bought their jerseys, etc. Once they start painting you the problem, they're well and truly on the payroll.
Well, Michael Dawson was sadly, maybe getting close to that in one of his interviews. So hopefully that doesn't have to happen again. But that's a very fair point. Let me know what you guys think on that. Just a quick conspiracy theory question I kind of had towards the end there, maybe about the PR team that seems to be developing in and around Daniel Levy and protecting him during these times of pressure. But please, everybody, smash the like button on the way out. And let us know in the comments below what you think of Hugo Lloris's comments, whether you agree with him or not. And we'll see you next time. Come on, you
Have a good
Spurs.
weekend. Come on, you
Have you a good
Spurs.
weekend.